You're juggling it all: work, family, decisions, expectations, 6 hats, maybe more every single day. But behind the scenes, your body is running on stress, and stress left unchecked will lead to illness. I'm Dr. Shami, an integrated family doctor, and this is 6 Hats, the podcast that helps you understand what stress is doing to your body and what you can do about it now. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the 6 Hats podcast. And today's conversation is one I think so many people, especially high achievers, busy professionals, entrepreneurs, parents, and creatives are going to deeply relate to. So we're joined by Francine Freedman, an ADHD coach and consultant who helps adults discover their own personal recipe for success. Now, Francine is accredited through the ADDCA in New York, the gold standard in ADHD coaching worldwide. And today's conversation is especially interesting as Francine has a unique background from finance and Wall Street to education and coaching, giving a deeper understanding of performance, pressure, overwhelm, and what it really means to thrive with an ADHD brain. Welcome, Francine.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So I'm really excited because you're absolutely right. And we had a little conversation before we were recording that it's more than just a drug. And this is what integrative medicine is all about. Yes, there's a role for the drug, but like what you said, there is so much more in terms of skills, developing skills to help you to actually live a fulfilling life and not just about focus and getting tasks done in the day. So we're going to dive in, Francine. Why do so many people with ADHD seem successful on the outside, but struggle so much internally?
Sure. So many people with ADHD become highly compensatory. So they survive through stress, through urgency, through adrenaline, perfectionism, masking, and overworking. And high achievement, it does not mean low struggle. It often means high achievement comes with high struggle. Just because you're succeeding on the outside does not mean you're thriving on the inside. And a lot of successful ADHD adults are kind of holding it together externally while internally experiencing a tremendous amount of overwhelm, exhaustion, anxiety, shame, burnout, especially if they haven't learned skills and strategies of how to work with their ADHD brain wiring. So a lot of people often feel like they have to work 5 times harder than everyone else to get equal or less output. Many people become experts at hiding their struggles because they've received so much criticism since childhood. The research shows that by the time a child with ADHD is 12 years old, they will have received 20,000 more criticisms than their neurotypical peers. And then this sets the stage for long-standing shame and harsh self-talk and low self-esteem and people-pleasing and perfectionism and imposter syndrome and burnout. So a lot of these cycles get created of overperforming, burnout, shutdown, and then recovery, and then rinse and repeat the same cycle, unfortunately. But yeah, people often confuse external success with internal well-being, and they don't necessarily come hand in hand. And one of the hidden costs of high functioning ADHD is often incredible nervous system strain. Yeah, and people will often say, nobody knows how hard I work to pull things off behind the scenes. So yes, the cost can be extremely high to being a high functioning person with ADHD, and it's not sustainable unless you work on learning more systems and more strategies to help support yourself.
That's amazing. And we're going to go into systems and strategies, but I'm going to sideline here for a quick moment and just connect the dots, because literally what I see in clinic is the highly stressed person, often burnout, and I see the impact on the physical body. So it could be irritable bowel, it could be nutrient deficiencies, it could be brain fog, it could be gut symptoms, hormonal disruption, weight gain, and the list goes on. And often in the medical model, we're just focused on the symptom control with a drug, which is yet another drug, rather than just looking at the root cause. And if anyone's been a listener to the 6 Hats podcast, they know I really talk about the connection between stress and the body, and how if we know strategies to manage stress, it will transform your physical health. So that's why this topic is actually so important. So I'm going to go on to the next question is, what are the biggest signs of high achieving ADHD that people often miss in adulthood, and especially in women?
Right. Okay. So we say that ADHD doesn't walk alone. It often comes with anxiety and or depression and or addictions and or many of the things that you just mentioned, IBS and things like that. So oftentimes women are just diagnosed with the surface level problems when really it's the undiagnosed ADHD and the stress that comes with undiagnosed ADHD that's often driving many of those other things that you listed. And yes, women often present differently than the stereotypical hyperactive boy bouncing off the grade school walls. And it's more internalized symptoms like overthinking, perfectionism, people pleasing, emotional overwhelm, difficulty switching off, time management issues, procrastination, emotional dysregulation, inconsistency in performance. And then, of course, there's the last minute adrenaline scramble to get things done. So, yeah, women are frequently missed because they didn't have the hyperactivity. They might not understand that ADHD is a challenge of executive function difficulties, not just focus. So, there's a lot of complexity and a lot of hidden symptoms that come along, especially for women with ADHD.
I love what you said about not switching off, because literally that will result in burnout. So I often say, work is work, and yes, there's stresses. But if you literally take homework with you in your mind, you're never switching off. And that will lead to burnout. So we're going to look into great strategies. But before we do, why do people with ADHD often work brilliantly under pressure, but struggle with consistency and routine? And believe it or not, I've heard so many stories from patients where they are in high functioning jobs. They're senior executives, managers, they're looking after a lot of people. Unfortunately, they're under a lot of pressure. So I'd love to know your thoughts on that.
Sure. So this is really common. Urgency creates dopamine and stimulation, and the ADHD brain is a dopamine deficient brain, always looking for that next hit of dopamine. Okay. So deadlines activate the nervous system. Many people with ADHD unknowingly train themselves to function through that stress chemistry, so they can perform exceptionally well under last minute deadlines, emergencies, crisis situations. Consistency is harder because routine tasks don't generate that same stimulation. And then this often creates a shame spiral of why can I do so well under pressure? And then, I can't get my taxes done, or I can't do the life admin or the business admin. And this is not a laziness problem. It's really difficulty regulating attention, motivation, and activation. And there's a lot that you can do to support yourself. External structure helps a tremendous amount. Reducing environmental friction helps. So ADHD brains often wait for urgency to create enough stimulation to engage, but relying on adrenaline to perform is not a great productivity strategy. That's really unmanaged ADHD, because running on adrenaline and cortisol is exhausting. It creates that boom and bust cycle of push and then collapse and then repeat. And yeah, there's absolutely better systems out there. And if somebody's dominant productivity system is panic or last minute adrenaline, this is what leads to burnout and exhaustion and other conditions like the IBS, et cetera, migraines, things that just, the chronic stress takes a toll on the physical body.
And you've mentioned nervous system regulation a few times, which I love. So how much of ADHD is actually about nervous system regulation rather than simply attention?
Yeah, a whole lot. So ADHD is far bigger than attention. Executive function challenges include organization, difficulties with organization, procrastination, time management, poor memory, poor planning, poor follow through, poor emotional regulation. So there's a lot more than just focusing issues here. And ADHD impact is going to impact, therefore, your emotional regulation, your stress tolerance, your ability to get good sleep, your overwhelm, your impulsivity. There's a lot of different branches that ADHD affects. And absolutely, if your nervous system is activated, it means your prefrontal cortex is probably going to be offline. Okay, so the very skills that you need to access to fix a problem when your nervous system is under high stress are going to be harder to access. So yes, nervous system regulation is absolutely essential for people with ADHD. It's a critical skill to build because it makes someone's executive functioning capacity dramatically harder if they've got a dysregulated nervous system. So like a lot of the pieces of the puzzle need to be supported, getting the right sleep and movement and diet and all of and learning how to feel your feelings instead of numbing them or escaping them, etc. There's a lot of different branches that need support in order to work towards getting a more regulated nervous system. And when you have a more regulated nervous system, your executive functioning will improve dramatically.
I loved how you mentioned holistic care because this is literally what we do at Mint Clinic. Absolutely. Sleep, so important. And often I hear stories of can't really get to sleep. So I'm on my phone or I wake up in the middle of the night and the first thing I reach is the phone. And that is something you've got to be aware that's going to keep you awake. Let's look at other strategies. And a couple of other things which I recognize in my patient stories, how much caffeine they drink in order to help them focus. And I have one patient who drinks about 6 to 8 cups of coffee in order to get tasks done, and how that has a huge impact on losing magnesium, but stimulating that cortisol to the point that you're not sleeping and the whole cycle continues. How often do you hear that story in your patients, in your clients?
Every day, all day long, and sleep, diet, and exercise are the very biggest levers that people have to support their foundation to focus. And that is, again, environmental design to help people, take back control from their devices, to help them get into a good wind down routine, to help them learn how to optimize their focus and their energy and their productivity without relying on the stimulant of caffeine or nicotine or whatever it is. Alcohol, people are always, it's like people are always dipping into something to kind of boost their dopamine. We want people to have adaptive ways of boosting their dopamine. So getting the right sleep, diet, and exercise will partially help them. Being on the right medication will partially help them if it's appropriate. Being involved in things that are fun and meaningful and engaging for them will partially help them. There's a lot that somebody can do to kind of boost their healthy dopamine menu, as opposed to always having the fallback of coffee and cigarettes and vaping and all those things, which just compound the other problems. So absolutely, sleep, diet, and exercise are the foundation to help people focus.
So now I want to go into the fun part and talking about all these practical changes someone with ADHD can make today to feel calmer, more focused, and less overwhelmed. Where would you start, Francine?
Okay, there's a lot of hope out there, and there's so many things that people can do to support themselves. The first one is just stop trying to rely on willpower alone. Okay, you want to externalize everything. We say, as brilliant as your brain is, it is not a great place to store things. Don't expect that you're going to remember important tasks or to-dos. So make time visible, use calendars, use reminders, use visible systems, use whiteboards, use task managers. Just externalize things so that you're not the overwhelm and the tasks are not bouncing around in your brain. You want to kind of download all of your ideas into a kind of a thought parking lot or a Google Calendar or something that means that you don't always have to feel that anxiety button about, will I remember? There's something that I have to do. There's something that I have to take care of. So definitely use assisted technology. You want to try to make tasks easier, make the entry points easier to start out with, break things down. What's the smallest little easiest step that I can take to get myself started? Because sometimes people feel like it's too hard to climb the whole mountain, but if I had to take one tiny step for the next 5 minutes, I could do that. So a lot of times it's about shrinking the initial step. Like, what's the smallest, tiniest step that I could take to get me going? And then once your batteries are running, it's easier to keep going. Definitely learning strategies for prioritization and follow through. Absolutely. So high achievement, it boils down to two things. And there's so many productivity videos and books out there. But in my opinion, high achievement really boils down to prioritization, identifying what the most important tasks are that you have to do to move the needle forward, and follow through, learning how to execute what it is that you have to prioritize in your life. So learning skills around prioritization and follow through is really, really important. Focusing on some of those other external factors, getting the right sleep, the right movement, the right diet, building good routines that serve you, environmental design, like reducing distractions. All of these things are really, really, really helpful. I always say environment beats willpower every single time. So if you set yourself up in an environment where where ADHD brains succeed, you will do much better than just saying, I have to try harder. And many people kind of whip themselves saying, I have to try harder, but that it never really works. So environmental design, plugging into support, creating external feedback and accountability loops really helps. And also just knowing that success is not a solo climb. Like a lot of people with ADHD are struggling alone and figuring things out alone, and they don't like asking for help because they feel like a failure. Needing support sometimes can feel like weakness. Years of shame teach I have to be self-reliant. So oftentimes people hide the struggle and they try to white knuckle everything. But really, the moment when people with ADHD accept support, everything changes because external structure improves focus, accountability improves follow through, scaffolding reduces overwhelm. And a lot of people are struggling from lack of support. So definitely plugging into the right support helps people go further and farther than they could go on their own.
I'd love for you to speak to that executive, because I'm actually visualizing one of my patients right now who's high functioning, a senior exec role, and finding it hard to get tasks done early. Like she waits for the last moment, which creates a huge amount of stress. What strategies would work for her?
Yeah. Okay. So I think there's a number of game-changing strategies, and part of it is learning to map your harder or your more boring tasks to times of the day when you're more awake, alert, and motivated. Okay. So usually there's going to be different zones. There's more of a genius zone when you're awake, alert, and motivated, and you can get things done. There's an intermittent zone when people feel like, they can get shorter tasks done, but they're feeling kind of restless. And then there's a recharge zone when they're just feeling tired and washed out and spacey. And a lot of times what might take you half an hour to do in the morning, if that's your genius zone, might take you a few hours to do in the afternoon. And it might take you 10 hours or never to do later in the day, which often is when people with ADHD are trying to address their hardest, challenging work. They're procrastinating and leaving it to the end of the day. But by definition, their medication has run out. They're tired. They've exhausted their executive functioning cup. And then their brain doesn't have the capacity to get their harder, their deeper work done. So absolutely learning how to design your day to get your harder, your more boring tasks done when you're more awake, alert, and motivated is absolutely a game changer. And this is, by the way, why many of the mainstream strategies for time management and productivity do not work for people with ADHD, because it doesn't take into account that time is not linear for people with ADHD. Okay, so there's going to be big swings in when you can focus and when you can't, when you have more energy and when you don't. So the way you design your day is drastically different than kind of what many of the mainstream strategies out there and what many of the mainstream productivity gurus out there are recommending for people who are more neurotypical and they have a more linear focus base throughout the day.
Amazing, amazing. Have you heard of strategies like body doubling to get things done?
Absolutely. Body doubling is one of the best strategies that somebody can plug into. So yes, this is research backed that just having somebody literally sit by your side can help you focus and follow through. And that's where working in a library or an office or a coffee shop can just engage that ADHD brain to get so much more done and switch on, as opposed to working from home where it's just you and your devices left to your own time management without a lot of external stimulation and structure. And that's where, a lot of productivity tends to take a nosedive.
And I haven't really touched on this, but I think this is a major player. It's screen time and the use of phones, notifications. Wow, people are spending hours on their phone and constantly distracted by it with notifications. No doubt in my mind that is going to have a huge impact on your focus and concentration. Can you speak a few words around that?
Yeah, I mean, people absolutely need to put boundaries on their technology in order to get their deep work done to function. I personally think that because we live in this digital technology era, many people who don't have neurobiological ADHD feel like they have ADHD because of all of the constant notifications and text messages. It reduces even a neurotypical person's ability to focus. So, how much more so does technology reduce somebody's ability to focus who already has a hard time with distractions, already has a hard time with maintaining focus? And yeah, that's a big part of what I do in coaching is help people create more boundaries around their technology. And a lot of people with ADHD, they get stuck in what we call procrastivity, which means they look busy and they feel busy, but what they're doing is not actually that important. Okay. So sometimes procrastination hides in being busy, but you're so busy checking your phone or being on your devices or being involved in things that are low priority that you're not sitting around doing nothing, but you're busy with things that are not pushing the needle forward. And that's a big part of what I do in coaching is teaching people how to put boundaries around the things that suck your time but don't move the needle forward, and how to get more done with less stress and overwhelm for the tasks that are really the priority. And that's going back to what we said earlier is if you want to be a high achiever, you have to know how to manage your prioritization and your follow through, and managing distractions is a huge part of that. If you don't know how to manage your distractions, you're just being pulled away all day every day by your distractions and not really moving the needle forward.
That's amazing. And before we let you go, I'd love to know, do you have any tips for those who find it hard to switch off in the evening?
Yeah, I mean, this is a big topic of, being so busy during the day that you feel like you have to reclaim your time to kind of re-regulate at night. So a big part of it is kind of carving out little pockets of time where you can regulate your nervous system during the day so you don't feel like you have to reclaim your time at night and then be up late doing things because you never had any me time during the day. Having a great wind down strategy, things that kind of take your nervous system down, right? Like more technology stimulates your nervous system. So oftentimes people are doing the things that won't help them relax at night. They'll actually stimulate them further. And then it's so much harder for them to get to bed. But absolutely environmental design, like blocking yourself out of technology usage, having some wind down time, picking picking your activities in the evening is really important. Your diet is really important. Your diet can either lead you to having a better sleep cycle or lead you to have a worse sleep cycle. So all of these things, there's a lot of levers that you can pull to try to help you switch off. And a lot of people with ADHD will say they're tired but wired. They're exhausted at the end of the day and they don't know how to wind down. So there's a lot of different things to try to implement to help people with that. But it's a very widespread problem that people with ADHD will often feel like I'm tired but wired. My body's exhausted, but my brain won't switch off.
Amazing. Such a great conversation, Francine. Where can people find you? I know you're in Melbourne, which is so
Yes,
awesome.
yes. I'm in Melbourne. You can go to my website, Francine Freedman, Francine Freedman, FREEDMAN.com. Anyone is welcome to book in for a free initial consultation to find out more about ADHD coaching and see if it would be the right fit for them. Yes, you can email me through my website. You can call me through my website. So the best place to find me is pretty much my website.
Amazing. And before, I have to say, you're so experienced, years and years of experience. How many patients did you say you've seen? Is that over 1,500?
1,500 clients in the last 10 years.
And also, you mentioned lots of doctors, psychiatrists have referred to you as well.
Yeah. Yeah, over 700 doctors referrals. So I was the first accredited ADHD coach in Victoria. So I've kind of been around the block, seen a lot. gotten a lot of experience, grown a lot through helping people and getting a lot of practical hands-on experience. And yeah, if there's one thing that I could say is there's a lot of hope out there. Somebody who has an ADHD diagnosis, there's so much more they could do besides just taking a pill. There are so many skills, so many strategies, so many mindset shifts that within a short amount of time, people could really upgrade their performance, their productivity, their confidence, their well-being by just learning more skills and strategies of how to work with their ADHD brain wiring rather than constantly fighting against it.
Amazing. Thank you, Francine.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Six Hats, where it's all about progress, not perfection. If this episode spoke to you, don't wait, hit follow now, leave a quick review, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Want to take your next step today? Download my ebook. The link is waiting in the show notes. And remember, this is general advice only. Always speak to your practitioner for anything medical. See you next time.